Hello guys. Well, here we go. We start up with the videos again. This is section 5-9, which is where we put a lot of what we've been doing in using it with word problems. Okay, so this is slope-intercept form with applications. So important things to remember, okay? The rate of change is the M of the slope-intercept form. Okay, remember that the slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. The initial value, or what I sometimes refer to as the beginning for the b, because this is b, the initial value is beginning, b. The independent variable is x, the dependent variable is y. A sentence that I like to help to determine which one's the independent and which one's the dependent is blank depends on blank. And however you fill in this sentence, whatever is in the first blank is y, whatever is in the second blank is x. All right, so let's look at number 1. It says a computer repair shop charges a $25 fee in addition to $40 per hour to service a computer. Write an equation to represent the total cost to service a computer. Okay, so you've got to identify the variables, everything. So that means I've got to identify what is, so we're going to say let x equal and y equal. So I've got to find out which one is which. So what am I looking for is the total cost, but I got to figure out which one is which. So therefore, I'm going to fill in that sentence of blank depends on blank. Okay, so it's talking about hours and cost. Well, the cost depends on the number of hours. So therefore, x is the number of hours and the y is the total cost. Okay, so that's got that information. So now I think about, okay, what is the rate of change? Rate of change, that's usually a keyword of that per hour. So therefore, my rate of change is, and remember, you got to talk about words with this. So you have to have units when you write what the rate of change is. So rate of change, you've got to include the units. So we have $40 per hour. What is the initial value? That means what we start with. No matter how many hours they work, they're still going to charge you that $25. And then what is the independent variable? Remember, that's x. And we said that the x is the number of hours. And then what is the dependent variable, which is y, and that is the cost. Well, we got to write our equation in slope-intercept form. We filled all this out, but we have to still write the equation. What's the equation? Because that's my question that's being asked. So I plug it in to y equals mx plus b. So we have y equals 40x plus 25. This is my equation. And now that I know my equation, if it asked, how many hours did they work for $500? I could figure it out. Or how much would it cost for 3 hours? And you can figure that out. And we'll get to working one of those in a little bit. Okay. Number 3. Okay. It says Mark bought a season ticket to the ski resort for $3.95. However, he must pay $25 to rent skis each time he goes skiing. So every time he skis, he's got to pay $25. So that means that's my rate of change. So it's $25 per visit. So it's $25 every time that he goes to the resort. What's the initial value? That means to start off with, he pays the $3.95. Okay, so we've got to write an equation. That's going to be in that slope-intercept form. that talks about the total cost that Mark will pay for skiing the season. Okay, so with that, remember we have to label our variables, let X and Y. So the total cost is going to depend on how many times he goes there. So the total cost is again Y. And then the X is the number of visits. Okay, and remember rate of change, we didn't label this up here. Rate of change is M, and then the initial value is B, because we labeled everything else that would be in the equation. Okay, all right, so now down here, the independent variable is X, so that's going to be the number of visits. And yes, you have to write it in both places, so don't ask me if, well, why do I have to? You have to, because you've got to understand that it's meaning to the same thing. So yes, you write it in both places. The dependent variable is the total cost. So now my equation is going to be Y equals 25X plus 395. And moving on, now this was where we just wrote the equation. Now we're going to add another step to this. So you still are going to have to include this information here. You're not going to have to break it down like this, but you're going to include this information, and then we're going to now solve for something. Let's look at number 5. Move this down a little bit. Okay, so it says a truck rental company charges $19.95 to rent a truck plus 25 cents per mile. So that right there is my clue. This is M, this is B. We want to find the cost to rent a truck and drive 188 miles. So we want to find the cost. So we've got to remember here, okay, remember we've got blank depends on blank to be able to find out and label what are we letting X equal and what are we letting Y equal. So if I fill in this situation, my miles is not going to depend on my cost. My total cost is going to depend on the miles. So therefore, X is the number of miles and cost is, excuse me, my Y. So we would see cost depends on miles. And remember, it is Y depends on X. All right, so now we're going to take our information and plug it in. So my equation is Y equals 0.24X, because this is my M, 0.24, it's per 0.24 miles, $0.24 per mile, and then plus the 1995. Now is where I'm going to take my equation and solve. Now I'm going to find out, well, what is my cost? What is my Y? Because the 188 is miles, so that is what my X equals. So I'm going to plug in the 188 where the X goes. So I'm going to have 0.24 times 188 plus 1995. If you go straight to this, this is not the equation that represents the problem. This is the equation that represents, and now we plug in the information. So you have to have this equation and then plug it in and simplify. So I've got to do the 188 times 0.24, which gives me 45.12. And more than likely, you're going to be using your calculators for this. So I'll make sure that you understand the other information. But you have to write down every step. Okay, you type it, you write it. I'm sorry, you write it before you type it. So now I'm going to type this into the calculator. Plus 19.95. And we get a total cost that Y equals $65.07. Again, if you've got any questions, pause it, rewatch it, or come and ask me if you've got a question, please. Okay, jumping down to number 9. It says a hot air balloon at 1,400 feet descends. Okay, so that means it's going down. Okay, at a rate of 75 feet per minute. Find the time it will take the hot air balloon to reach the ground. Well, the descends actually is a distractor. We don't really need that information because we're just treating this as I'm sorry, we do. I'm looking at the wrong problem. We do need that. My brain was correct in what it's thinking. Descends means, okay, my rate of change, 75 feet per minute. That means I'm going down. That means that's going to be an M that is a negative 75. Okay, because it's going down. My B is the 1,400. Find the time it will take the hot air balloon to reach the ground. Okay, so what I've got to figure out, what am I letting X represent and what is Y representing? Okay, so we're talking about feet per minute. Well, when I'm looking at that, we want to find the time. So, and time is always X. It's very rarely not X. So when I'm figuring this out, if I use my blank depends on blank, my height depends on time. So we would say that the number of minutes is X and the height is Y, because we would say blank depends on blank. So we would say height depends on the time. So how much time you're coming down is going to determine what your height is at. So therefore, the equation, the initial equation is going to be a negative 75x plus 1,400, because the beginning amount is 1,400. It starts at 1,400 and then it's coming down at negatives at 75 feet per minute. So now I've got to think about, okay, what does it mean reach the ground? Well, what's the height at the ground? That would be 0. There's no height. So therefore, this would mean that the y is equal to 0. So I'm going to take and I'm going to plug in. I'm going to change colors here when I write this down. Okay. So this means that the y is 0, because when it's at the ground, it is at 0 feet. So we would have 0 equals negative 75x plus 1,400. And now we've got to solve for x. So I'd subtract 1,400, and that's going to give me negative 1,400 equals negative 75x. And now I divide by negative 75 to both sides. And this is when we use the handy dandy calculator. Negative 1,400 divided by negative 75. And that gives me that x equals 18.6 repeating, which is the same as 18 2/3. Because remember, this is talking about minutes. So this is 18.6 repeating minutes, 18 2/3 minutes, or it would be 18 minutes and 40 seconds. All of these are acceptable answers. Oh, let me make sure you can see it. Okay, if you've got any questions, oh, let's do 10. I wanted to do 10. That's right. Because there's a little difference that we have to do with that. Okay, so for number 10, again, we've got to label everything. So it costs $25 to rent a kayak in addition to $7.50 per hour. So the 25 is B, $7.50 is rate, so that's M. Logan rented the kayak at 11 a.m., then returned it later that evening. If he paid $70, what time did he return it? So I'm looking for what time. Okay, so I've got to figure out what my x, I'm going to let x equal and y equal. So blank depends on blank. We're talking about money and hours. So my cost depends on how many hours. So the money depends on time. So therefore x is going to, because this is y and this is x. So therefore x is going to be, we're talking about hours. So this is going to be number of hours. Y is the cost. So my equation is going to be y equals 7.5x plus 25. And now I have to look at what else we have here. Okay, so paid $20, paid $70. So that means that my y is, that means y equals 70. So I'm going to now plug in the information. So I'm going to have 70 equals 7.5x plus 25. Subtract 25 from each side. And we get 45 equals 7.5x. Divide by 7.5. And I punch that into the handy-dandy calculator, and we get that 6 equals x. Now, I can think, oh, that's my answer, but I'm not finished. It wants to know what time. 6 is not a time. It starts at 11. So I have to add 6 hours to 11 o'clock, which is going to put it at 5 p.m. This is my final answer. Okay, your assignment is to finish the notes and the classwork homework. Have a great day.